Shabbat shalom, everyone. Welcome, you holy angels. Shalom aleichem, malachei asharet, malachei elyon. Mi melech, malachei hamelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Boachem l'shalom, malachei hashalom, malachei elyon. Mi melech malachei hamelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Baruchuni l'shalom, malachei hashalom, malachei elyon. Mi melech malachei hamelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Teichem l'shalom, malachei hashalom, malachei elyon. Mi melech malachei hamelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shabbat shalom, Shabbat shalom. Welcome from near and far. So happy to see you here tonight. If you want to tell us in the chat who you are, where you're tuning in from, we're always happy to know who is with us. I want to share a poem by way of welcome, and we can actually pull our slides down for a minute. This poem is by Chaim Nachman Bialik, who is a Hebrew language Russian poet. And this is a snippet of a longer poet, but I just loved what he had to say. He says, Chogu et chagei avotechem, v'hosifu aleihem k'tzat mishelachem, lefi kochachem, ulefi ta'amchem, ulefi mesibatchem, ha'ikar sheta'asu et hakol be'emunah, umitoch hargasha chaya v'tzorech nafshi. Celebrate the festivals of your ancestors and add to them a little bit of yourself according to your own strength and your own tastes and how you like to party. The important thing is that you do everything with faith and from a lively spirit and from a soulful need. And that just spoke to me entering this Shabbat, coming out of Passover, which is a holiday where we can feel very beholden to the traditions of our ancestors. And it can feel hard after 7 or 8 days of intense Judaism in a way that we're often not used to come into Shabbat and say, okay, I'm going to do this too now. And so I love that Bialik invites us to make this Shabbat, to make this sacred occasion our own, to think about what ties us to the people who came before us, but also what animates our desire to be connected to them and our desire to dig in. And also to think about what it is that we have to give in this moment. What is the soulful need that we are looking to fill for ourselves? So in this moment, if you don't have energy to cook, order in. If you're not in the mood to focus, put down the computer somewhere else in the room and go look out at the window. If you're not in the mood to party, no problem. Just lay down, curl up, follow along as you drift off to sleep. The point here is to take what is good and add to it what you need. So that's what we're going to do for the next 45 or 50 minutes. We're going to sing, and we're going to bless, and we're going to learn, and we're going to pray, and we're going to use that to set the tone for the next 25 hours that are going to be a connection to other people and also a connection, a chance to check in with ourselves, with what we need, with how we can joyfully enter this moment. And as a little preview, we are going to be doing Kiddush and candlelighting and motzi tonight. So if you want to, as I sing us into Shabbat, get yourself set up with the accoutrements of Shabbat, get some candles, get something bready, get some wine or grape juice or something to drink. Now is a good time to get yourself settled so that you can be really present, really focused in whatever it is you're doing now, even if that's preparing dinner as you listen. Nechuner hanena l'Adonai Bizmira Narialo Nekadma Fanav Betoda Bizmirot Narialo Yadai 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 L'Adonai Nari Aletoishenu Nekadma Fanav Betoda Bizmirot Nari Alo. As we enter with joy, we also recognize that it has not been a week of joy for everybody. There are people who are suffering in an ongoing way. There are people whose suffering has plunged itself into their lives. I want to take a moment now, especially to recognize that a week ago, 2 sisters and their mother were shot and killed in the West Bank while driving by a suspected Palestinian Arab. And they were driving north for a Passover vacation as a family. It's one more tragedy in what feels to me like an endless tit for tat of violence and murder, and each side hurting the other while they are hurting. And in thinking about this week, I thought maybe I would speak about it tonight as a drash. And I just could not bring myself to spend that kind of personal, emotional energy diving in again. I didn't have it in me. The prayer for healing that we say on Shabbat actually says, Shabbat hi milizo, which means on Shabbat, we're not supposed to cry out in desperation, which is an ironic thing to say in a prayer for healing. And it's a reminder that on Shabbat, when things feel tough, we do something a little different. When we feel desperation, when we feel desperate sadness on Shabbat, we lean into peace. And it might be a true memory of a moment that we felt peaceful. Or it could be an aspirational memory, a moment that we could imagine being one of true peace. Take a moment to close your eyes, to breathe a little bit, to let your heart rate calm if it's spiked when I said the word Israel or West Bank. If remembering whatever desperation or desperate sadness had hold of you this week spiked your heart rate, be gentle with it. Breathe a little deeper, a little slower. See if you can bring to your mind a moment that felt peaceful to you, whether you have been there or not. Put yourself back in that feeling of peace. That feeling of softness and tranquility and spaciousness. If you want to keep your eyes closed, you can. If you want to open them back up as a way of inviting that memory of peace back in, you can do that. And as we invite Shabbat into our community like a queen, we say, Boi b'shalom, come in peace. I want to share a melody that I learned in Jerusalem at a community called Yakar. One of my core memories of Israel, when someone says Israel and terror, is an experience I had years ago, crowding into the little room where Yakar meets on a Friday evening, just minutes after the rocket attack siren sounded in Jerusalem. And we all had to make the decision, do we risk it to walk over to go to services? And it was the most packed I've ever seen Yakar in my life. And when I think of Israel, one of the things I think of is standing in that packed room after that moment of danger and singing this melody with all my heart and with all my soul and with all my might. And so for me, this melody is a true prayer for peace. It's not just as an absence of violence, but as a true peacefulness and safety of the soul. If you are in need of this kind of release from anxiety or illness or suffering, you're invited to share the name of who you're thinking of, the thing that you need in the chat if you'd like to. And then to let your shoulders drop a little bit. If you want to stand and face your door, you can. If you want to just face towards whatever goodness could be coming to you, do that to welcome in some peace and in some healing. Boi b'shalom, boi b'shalom, ateret bala, gam b'simcha, u'b'tzola. Toch emune am segula, boi chala, boi chala. Mechadodi likrat kala pene Shabbat nekabela. Welcome peacefulness, welcome tranquility, welcome spaciousness, welcome joy and delight. We're going to light the candles for Shabbat. And when we do that, we use our hands to draw in the light towards us before we cover our eyes. And so I like to always think to myself, what am I drawing in this Shabbat? When we do services in person, the davening team likes to get together to light candles and also say, what are you bringing this Shabbat? So this Shabbat, I am bringing play. I'm bringing a sense of playfulness into my life, the opportunity to play with the people around me, to play with my space, with my time. That sense of lightness and buoyancy, and it's not so serious, is the idea that I want to channel for this Shabbat. If you haven't yet had a chance to share anything in the chat, or if you just feel like you want to really let us know what you're thinking tonight, what are you bringing in? What are you drawing towards you as we light these Shabbat candles? Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat. My dog, who you just saw jump off the couch. Do you want to come back, little bear? Come on up. We're talking about you. She might come back. She is a very good dog. She is generally patient and gentle and sweet and friendly and cuddly and chill, except for when we are in the park and another dog comes sniffing around my fanny pack looking for a treat. Then my very kind and patient and loving dog turns into a growling aggressor, chasing off anyone who dares to try to eat her treats. She's even been known to be not totally careful with her teeth when she's snatching one out of my hand with a little too much zeal. She will eat, and I mean this truly, absolutely anything, and she will only eat alone. When you give her a treat, she runs away and hides to eat it. Which means that my dog is the opposite of what it means to keep kosher. Kashrut literally means fitness. And yes, in Israel, a gym is called a cheder kosher, a fitness room. The practice of keeping kosher is the traditionally Jewish set of practices that govern both what and with whom we eat. Kashrut as fitness is not just about what is fit to put in the body, but also what is proper, what allows us to be intentional in our relationship to the land and to the people who are our people, whatever that means for us. The idea of kashrut starts actually in this week's parsha, where we get some of the original laws of kashrut. Really, these amount to God telling Moshe things like, eat this and not that, and then getting into specifics about split hooves and removable scales. As with much of the book of Leviticus, God does not seem to give much of an explanation for why we are adopting these eating practices, and just says, Ki ani Adonai Elohechem v'hitkadishtem v'haitem kedoshim ki kadosh ani. Because I am holy. I am your God. So you shall make yourselves holy and become holy, just like I am holy. Is there a theme here? In the seeming absence of a reason to eat according to these fairly stringent guidelines, religious commentators and anthropologists alike have speculated on what is the origin of this particular set of laws. One prevailing sociological theory has to do with health and sanitation. Again and again in this section of the Torah, God says, don't eat this ki tamehu, which is usually translated as because it is unclean. So you might even have heard a theory that kashrut was meant to spare the Israelites from trichinosis, I think that's how you say it, which is found commonly in pork products. But this theory has been largely debunked because there's plenty of other types of food poisoning that you can get from other kinds of meat before refrigeration. The idea of kashrut as ancient food safety stems, I think, from a mistranslation. That tameh doesn't mean unclean in a dirt-free sense. Its opposite is not naki, which does mean clean. The opposite of tameh is tahor, which means pure. Tameh means impure or unclean in a ritual sense, not fit to eat because it doesn't align with the community norms and practices. Our instinct to prescribe meaning to the categories on the basis of the categories themselves, saying there must be something wrong with pork if we can't eat it, there must be something wrong with shellfish, is deeply human and therefore missing the mark. That kashrut is not about the particulars of a category, as if fins and scales and hooves is somehow better than animals that don't have those. What God seems to want in this parsha is for humans to be conscientious about the process of categorization, the act of thinking about what something is and then deciding if it is fit to eat or not. The problem is not that horses or pigs are more or less sanitary than cows. They just don't fit the categories that God has laid out. And in fact, many other major religions observe some kind of dietary laws, Muslims and Hindus and Buddhists and Sikhs and so on. And each one is particular in their own ways for a reason. Religious dietary practices are partly, at least, about adherence to a particular system, reminding yourself that you have intentionality in belonging to a specific group every time you put food in your mouth, which for most of us is at least 3 times a day. The ancient philosopher Philo of Alexandria said that the essential lesson of kashrut is that because we are capable of making choices, and even making choices that are difficult, therefore we should do so. Unlike animals, which eat whatever they can find, we as humans can be choosy about our food. We can take it in slowly. We can savor it. We can wait until everyone is served, not because we were commanded to do so, but because it's common courtesy. Kashrut is an old school mindful eating practice, one that calls us to pay attention to our food before it ever goes into our bodies. Therefore, it is the opposite of my dog. The other element of kashrut is that who you eat with is who you build community with. So for the Israelites in the desert, recently freed from slavery, building a national identity and a sense of belonging to each other and to God was a vital task. For the next several thousand years of Jewish history, the ability to draw boundaries around our community was a critical tool for survival, which takes us back to the original Torah justification for keeping kosher, that kashrut helps us be holy like God. To understand how this is truly a justification, we need to do a little lesson in linguistics. So in ancient Hebrew, the root for the word that we now translate as holy, kuf daled shin, kadesh, means to be separated. So kedusha, holiness, is about separateness. Yes, this relies on intentionality, but it also means that acting with kedusha in our eating means differentiating ourselves. It's what my dog cannot do, but I can. I can look at people and I can say, yes, I want to share food with you as a way of forging social connections. And I can look at others and I can say, pass thanks, or pass for now. I can build community around my food. Kashrut is about separating people, marking one group as an us and another group as a them, which is why the early reformers, the first Reformed Jews, rejected it. Abraham Geiger, who was a German rabbi and considered the founding father of Reform Judaism, wrote of kashrut, and I quote, "These dietary laws that are such a hindrance to the development of social relationships." For Reform Jews, in the classical sense, being separate from secular society was a hindrance to the kind of lives that they wanted to lead, and so they eschewed keeping kosher. They even, mythically, famously, had a treif buffet where they held a party of Reformed Jews and ate things that are specifically not kosher. On the other hand, for Jews looking to solidify their differences from their neighbors, kashrut was an excellent built-in tool. In the time of the Maccabees, Jews chose to be martyrs rather than eat pork, sending the message to the Greeks that they would literally rather die than socialize with them. What God is telling the Israelites in commanding them to keep kosher was, make yourself separate from the other nations in the way that I am separate from their gods, and do it in the fundamental practice of eating. Eating is a form of belonging, of making intentional choices about what we eat and with whom as an exercise of human sacredness. One of my earliest memories is as a kindergarten student when someone in my class had a birthday during Passover. And I distinctly remember my mom came to school that day during the cake part of the day and gave me a kosher for Passover blueberry muffin. And she and I were discussing this incident a few years ago, and she asked me, did I make a mistake? Should I have just let you eat cake with the rest of your class? And I said, not at all. I didn't resent that muffin, even as a 6-year-old, even though it meant less sugar, because I knew that it made me Jewish. It made me belong to the people who matter to me. Who we eat with matters just as much as what we eat, which is the essence of keeping kosher. And even if you don't consider yourself to keep kosher, you kind of do this probably in the way that you eat anyway, even if you don't call it kashrut. For example, maybe you make a gluten-free dessert when you know that you're having guests over who are gluten intolerant. Or maybe you make plans to meet a sober friend for a movie or coffee instead of going to a bar. Or maybe you don't wear your leather jacket when you meet up with your vegan friend, and so on. Keeping kosher means looking carefully at an item and deciding if it is fitting for the kind of life that we want to lead and the kind of community we want to belong to. So in the 1970s, Reb Zalman Schachter Shalomi, who is the founder of Renewal Judaism, coined the term eco-kashrut to refer to practices such as avoiding buying items that were packaged in styrofoam or avoiding buying from big agribusinesses, even if that meant choosing an item that didn't have a hechsher, which is the name for the symbol of something's ritual fitness. Following on Reb Zalman Schachter Shalomi's practices, about a decade ago, in response to an investigative journalism report on poor working conditions in a kosher agriprocessor, Rabbi Morris Allen of Minnesota started something called the Magen Tzedek, a kind of kosher certification that attests that the production of that product was up to Jewish legal standards on labor and animal rights and environmental stewardship, along with its ritual kashrut. The label itself is actually not very widely used, but it reminds us that Jewish law cares about more than just what species we consume. Eating Jewishly, which, by the way, you don't actually have to be formally Jewish to do, should remind us of our humanity and our social connections and our ethical values. Passover tends to be the time of year that most Jews and Jewish adjacent folks think most about keeping kosher, even if they don't do it the rest of the year. It was actually very common in my public but fairly Jewish middle school for people to bring ham and cheese on matzah sandwiches during Passover, thereby utterly disregarding the prohibition on eating pig products and the prohibition on eating milk and meat together, while simultaneously holding fast to the prohibition on bread for Passover. I don't tell you that as a knock to that practice. In fact, I commend it. It's a reminder, first of all, that kashrut is not all or nothing. If that is your version of kashrut, I am proud of you for taking the time to change things up in honor of Passover. And my invitation to you in this day after Passover Shabbat is not to lose the momentum of that intentional eating, even as we go back to our squishy, bready, carby lives. Maybe for you, keeping kosher means buying your pork from a co-op of small-scale farmers who you get to know personally, and you share the meat with your friends. Maybe it means learning about fair trade certifications and looking at the labels of your food to ensure that they weren't produced with slave labor. Maybe it means keeping a set of dishes in your home so that you can invite over friends for whom keeping kosher is a more strict Jewish sense of the law. Or maybe you're the strict one and you offer to order takeout from a kosher place so that you can go over to a friend's house for dinner. The goal here is for you to look at your food practices with intention and with connection, and to remind yourself that it is sacred to be connected with both what we eat and who we eat it with. So in that spirit, because I would love to break bread virtually with all of you, I'm going to invite you to get your Kiddush cup, if you have one, and if not, I'll hold one up for you. And we will make Kiddush together, and then we will make motzi together. Vayher vayvoker yom hashishi, vayechulu hashamayim v'haaretz, v'chol tzevam, vayechal Elohim bayom hashvi, melachto asher asa, vayishbot bayom hashvi'i mikol melachto asher asa, vayevarech Elohim et yom hashvi'i, vayikadesh oto, ki vo shavad mikol melachto asher bara Elohim lasot savri. You can cheers with me l'chaim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Borei Pri Hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu, v'shabbat kodsho b'ahava u'ratzon hinchilanu, zikaron l'maaseh v'reishit, ki hu yom techila l'mikrai kodesh, zecher l'tziad Mitzrayim. Kivanu v'acharta ve'otanu kidashta mikol ha'amim v'shabbat kodshecha v'ahava u'ratzon hinchaltanu baruch atah Adonai mekadesh haShabbat. L'chaim. To you and your good life. Now, if you'd like to hold up whatever version of bready goodness you have with you tonight, even if it's gluten-free. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen. Blessed is the one who brought this bread to me. And want some? To my dog. Here. That's right. There you go. Good job. Bread never gets old. As we move our way towards closing for tonight, you can see that the sun is starting to set outside my window. It's getting a little darker. I want to take a moment to remember those in our community who have been lost, of course, the 3 Ds who were murdered last week, and anyone who you are holding in your heart, whether they died recently or many years ago. If you want to share with us who you are thinking of, if you want to say their name out loud in your space so that they get mentioned this week, I invite you to do that. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah. Be'alma divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei v'chayechon uvyomechon uv'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael ba'agala uv'izman kariv v'imru. Amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olam u'me'ol maya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shemei dekudsha brichu. Le'ela mikol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, da'amiran be'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru. Amen. May all of their memories be blessings to you and to us. It's not exactly nighttime yet, which is when we would traditionally count the Omer, but it's the end of the day for us. So we are going to welcome in the opportunity to count time. I think we just released a few TikTok videos about how to count the Omer, why to count the Omer. If you haven't seen them because you're not on TikTok or you just haven't caught them yet, counting the Omer is a spiritual practice that we engage in from the second night of Passover all the way until Shavuot, 49 days, and the 50th is Shavuot. It was originally an agricultural cycle. It was counting from the first harvest until the true harvest time, which means that it is a time of watching bounty roll in and also a time of being anxious that we might not have enough and holding both of those together at the same time. It's also associated with mystical traditions and the idea of sort of elevating our spiritual state each week as we move from freedom to revelation, whatever calls to you. This practice is very basic in that we welcome in the opportunity to do this mitzvah, and then we just count days. So I will count the days. If you want to count along with me and you have forgotten, last night was 8. And so the number that comes after 8 is what we will say in just a minute. It's one of my favorite superstitions in Judaism that we don't say the day before we count it. L'Shem Shabrichu, Kuchabrichu Shinte, Hineni Muchanu Mezuman, Lekayem Mitzvat Aseh, Shel Sfirat HaOmer, Shel Sfirat HaOmer, Shava Shabbatot, Temimot Tiena, Shava Shabbatot, Temimot Tiena, Al Sfirat HaOmer, Al Sfirat HaOmer, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al sfirat haomer, al sfirat haomer, al sfirat haomer, al sfirat haomer. Hayom Tisha Yamim LaOmer, Shehem Shnei Shavuot V'Shnei Yamim. Today is 9 days of the Omer, which is 1 week and 2 days. 9 down, 40 to go, folks. We'll close with a little song for peace, going back to that invitation for peace that we brought in for ourselves at the beginning of services. If you want to close your eyes and bring yourself back to that memory of peacefulness, that aspiration for peacefulness for yourself and others. And if you want to get up and dance, that's also a great way to welcome in peacefulness, to shake off the past week. It has been a pleasure to be on with all of you. Just a couple quick announcements before we actually close with Aseh Shalom. We will be again streaming and also in person if you're in the Chicago area tomorrow morning, celebrating a Bar Mitzvah. We have a bunch of good stuff coming up. I'm teaching a class on the book of Jeremiah and the spiritual power of kvetching, which will be in person in Chicago if you're around. We've got all sorts of other great things happening for families and kids and adults. And we've got a special Shabbat coming up in 2 Friday nights. So check out our latest email. There's always great stuff in there, and there's great stuff coming up soon. If you don't get our emails, maybe Will could drop a link to our website with the contact us form in it, and you can sign up for our emails, or you could just go to mishkanchicago.org, and we've got a little, do you want to get emails from us button? And you can click on that. It is the best way to get the links to join us and to know what is happening and when. And we're always happy to see you virtually and in person. Thank you so much for joining for this Shabbat, for welcoming squishy breadiness back into our lives with intention and with joy. And let's sing ourselves out with a little peace. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol yoshvei tevel. Ve'imru, amen. May you be blessed with peace and goodness and abundance and joy. L'chaim, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Until next time, I'm Rabbi Dina, and this is Mishkan Chicago.